Hello and welcome to Central Florida Salute. My guest today is Captain Donnie Cochran, United States Navy. I don't know if we're supposed to shake hands now.
How
because
about a fist bump?
All right, we do that.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
And United States Navy, you have quite the story, my friend. You were born in Georgia, am I correct?
That is correct. I have been very blessed in my life, and I'm at a point now where it's all about giving back. And that's why I'm here with you, Bob.
Okay. Yeah. So, what got you into the Navy? I mean, you said you were one of 12 children, right?
That is correct. First of all, I grew up on a farm in Pelham, Georgia, and I was fortunate to grow up in that environment because a lot of the traits that I learned that helped me through school and through the Navy and beyond were all developed on the farm. I mean, it was the fundamental values such as respect and honesty and hard work and all those things that make you a well-rounded person were developed on the farm. And my parents did a wonderful job. They had 12 kids. I was like number 5. There were 9 boys and 3 girls. He created his own workforce. I mean, it's a farm, right? You had to have a lot of labor, and my dad.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I heard that before.
So he did that, and so a lot of the structure in terms of working with my older brothers and my younger brothers, and motivating them to get the job done, so we're not in the hot sun all day. You know, all those skills were skills that I used once I left the farm as well. So that was the foundational environment that I grew in, and believe it or not, at the time I was sort of jealous of the kids that lived in the town. But the town was so small, I didn't realize it was just like the country anyway. but you know, as I grew up, by the time I was about the 9th grade, I realized how much better it was to grow up on the farm, and I still have the farm, as a matter of fact. So
you do?
I go back from time to time. That's a way of staying grounded, if you will.
Yeah, your brothers and sisters work with you on there?
One brother is still there. The rest of them are sort of scattered. Unfortunately, I lost one of my brothers, the one I was closest to.
I'm sorry.
He passed away in 2006, I think it was. So. But that's essentially, I mean, I could go in a lot of details. I would like to share this aspect of it. I was inspired to fly airplanes when I was working on the farm.
You had a fast tractor?
Well, it was, let's put it this way, I was out working, and my dad had a lot of produce, and okra was one of them. And as I was out harvesting the okra, there were airplanes that overflew the farm all the time, and we must have had a navigation route because there were Army, there were Navy, there were Air Force, there were civilians. They always flew about the same general area, and I was out working. And I was inspired by that because I said to myself, you know, that looked pretty cool up there, much better than this hot sun down here. So I was inspired, not just by that. I used to watch a lot of military movies, Victory at Sea, and I was always inspired and intrigued by the airplanes that landed on the ship. And so that drew me to the Navy.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, you've done quite a few landings, I remember you telling me.
Yes, I was fortunate enough to have 888 carrier landings. But who's counting? I can tell you
yeah, you're going to have to tell me some story, because I can't phantom landing on an aircraft carrier. You know, I mean, I was in the Air Force, and we had mile-long runways, you know, and you just take your time. But those carriers, I mean.
Yep, it's quite a rush to be able to land on the ship and take off. I can remember, I think, the very first carrier landing I made, and this was back in 1977 on the USS Lexington, a real small carrier. And it was a training carrier, and I was flying a T-2 Buckeye. That was the basic jet trainer that we use in the Navy. And you know, you did all the workups. You had about 10 field carrier landing. They call them FCLPs, periods where you go out and get 8 or 9 landing per period, and then they would evaluate you and see where you're ready to go out to the ship. And of course, we flew out to the ship and flying around. And the first landing you make on the ship you make it with the tail hook up. It's a touch and go. You come down and touch down, and you go back around and you try it again. And that phase of the landing process went well. And after the second one, you drop your hook, and now you come around and you land. And I was very fortunate to land the first time, and it was so busy on the flight deck, you really didn't have an opportunity to celebrate. It was like, get out of the way so somebody else can land and get ready to take off again. And it was so intense. And the thing I remember was I had jet exhaust getting into the cockpit, and my eyes were getting watery, and it was like, man, by the time I was done, I went back and landed back in Pensacola, and I was like, that's when I realized I was qualified now as a carrier pilot. 4 landings, 2 touch and goes. And so felt great. But during the process, you don't have time to celebrate. Because
when you were training for that, did you were like a co-pilot or somebody, you didn't just do it by yourself?
Well, yeah. When you go out to the ship, it's you and the elements, you and your aircraft. Wow. You don't have an instructor in the back helping you. You do it yourself. It's a solo mission. And I mean, that's the way you feel that confidence necessary to go out and do it day in and day out. You will not do night carrier landings until you're finished the training process, and then you're into the real Navy, the fleet. That's when you start doing the night carrier landings, but not in the training phase. So it was a wonderful experience. And, after that first landing, I said to myself, wow, man, this stuff can be a little risky.
Can be?
And then all of a sudden I said, I'm committed now, so I got to get my mind focused on how do I position myself and condition my mind to make sure that I, number one, get very good at this, because it's a very unforgiving environment to fly off the ship. I mean, you make mistakes, your head is in the wrong place. It won't take much before you find yourself in the water.
Yeah, luckily you never did, right?
I was very fortunate to not have to use that ejection seat to give the airplane back to the taxpayers. I didn't have to do that. So
the newer carriers, they have like a ramp on the end that lifts up, right?
Well, not the big super carriers. They don't. But there are some. Most of the carriers that you see the ski jump on are like the British, the Russians, the French. A lot of them have the ski jump, but the U.S. Navy do not have the ski jumps for taking off, for assisting them for the takeoff. We still have the catapults, and if they don't have a catapult, they have the vertical takeoff and landing airplanes that will come aboard. The Marines have those. Yep.
That's more my style.
There you go.
Yeah. So,
Bob, let me say something first.
Okay.
I want to tell you that I am very glad to be here.
Oh, I'm glad you're here.
And that happens to be the name of my book, Glad to Be Here. And that phrase was a phrase that the Blue Angel pilots use. And the phrase was used at the completion of your self-assessment in the debrief. I mean, after every flight, we had a debrief. Mm-hmm. And when you gave your assessment of how things went for the air show, you would say, I'm glad to be here, boss. And of course, the boss would say, I'm glad to be here. And what that phrase meant was, it was an expression of gratitude for the effort that it took for you to be a part of the team and the effort required for you to stay there. So when I say I'm glad to be here, it's expressing gratitude for the amazing journey that I've been very fortunate to live. So that's what it means. And I thought that would be a perfect title for my book. And I think if any Blue Angel that wrote a book could use that phrase, because it is such a captivating phrase. And you just think about it. You should be able to say to yourself right now that I'm glad to be here.
At my age, I'm glad to be anywhere.
Yeah, there you go. And if you can't say that, you need to figure out why is that. Because life is too short to intentionally have something that you're enjoying, that you're very happy about. And so That is a very special phrase, and it means so much.
Well, since you mentioned the book,
yes,
and we've got it here so
right.
people could see it.
Right.
Now, if somebody wants to buy it.
Amazon. It's on
Amazon.
Amazon. It's on Amazon.
Okay.
It's about, I think it's about $21. I wrote a chapter here called Humble Beginnings. And what humble beginnings talk about is a failure that I had early in my life. And it was the 7th grade. I actually had a setback. I didn't pass the 7th grade. And that was the hardest thing to put in the book. But it was the most important thing because I know there's some young folks out there that are having challenges and may have setbacks. And I want them to realize that you can certainly have a setback, but how you move forward is the key for overcoming any setback you may have in life. And so I put that in there specifically for that reason. And by the way, when I was buying my house in Claremont, there was a salesman in the office, and I mentioned to him about my book, and I told him I had failed the 7th grade, and he said, "Oh, you know what? I failed the 7th grade too." And it took me years to tell my wife. I said, "Yeah, I know the feeling." But anyway, it was it's useful to share not just your victories in life, but also to share those moments when you had to dig deep, to build your character, build those skills to overcome those challenges that everybody faces.
I tell everybody I had my most fun in school was the 5th grade. I enjoyed it so much I spent 2 years there.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Well,
we all, a lot of us go through that, you know.
Absolutely.
But anyway, we want to get back on your story. Yeah. So you decided to leave the farm, and where did you go? You had to go to a college first to get into Annapolis?
Well, I actually went to Savannah State University in Savannah, Georgia. And the way that came about was I had 3 brothers ahead of me and 1 sister. And my 3 brothers all went to Savannah State. And so it was a natural, transition or expectation that I would go to school too. Unfortunately, I wasn't as prepared as I should have been. But I certainly had to work really, really hard while I was in school. Was able to finish in 4 years. And the way I became interested, my brother came home, and he was wearing his Navy ROTC uniform. It was the tropical white uniform. He was real sharp.
You said that's me.
And he was getting ready to go on a midshipman cruise, and they were paying him some money to go, and I didn't have any money to go to school. And I saw that a way of pursuing my education and to fly in the Navy. Mm-hmm. And so when it was my turn, I joined the ROTC unit, and my second semester I earned a scholarship and was able to use that to help me get through school. So it worked out real well. And after 4 years, by the way, and I had like 230 credits, and I only needed 195. Did it in 4 years, no summer school. I felt really good about that, and earned my commission and degree at the same time, and went on to naval aviation from there.
And your degree is engineering?
Civil engineering. That's how at Black Engineer of the Year.
Right there,
yeah. So civil engineering technology was my degree. And let me speak to the Black Engineer of the Year, since it came up now. And the career communication was, they were focused on increasing minority representation in the engineering field. And one of the ways of doing that was highlighting minorities that have done something significant, even though it was not necessarily engineering, because I was a pilot, of course, but it was the engineering background that laid the foundation for what I was able to do in terms of aviation. So after my tour with the Blue Angel, my first tour, they wanted to highlight that achievement. And so I was recognized as the Black Engineer of the Year in 1989. And that is a tremendous award. Now the people that are winning it these are very senior people that are doing significant things for their organizations. And I was very fortunate to earn it at a very junior age when I was...
well, you definitely are a role model for a lot of young people. And I just want to tell you something. We talked about Dan.
Right.
And Gio, who was a Tuskegee Airman. I had the honor of interviewing him, and I listened to everything that he went through with all the prejudice and all that. And you know, he did have a bit of bitter thing, but he says he learned over the years to, you know, to forgive and forget. But yeah, this guy could, you know, he could fly anything, and he had bombing, pilot, co-pilot, navigator, whatever was in that plane, he had that. He could do that. But they put him with the bombers, but they never sent the bombers over there, so he never really got into the action. But when I think about, you know, African Americans, pilots, I can relate to Dan because I sat with him, and to see where it's come about now that you were in charge of the Blue Angels, and what you've done. I commend you, sir. I commend you.
Well, I can tell you this. When I was applying for the Blue Angels, one of the things I did was I paid a visit to Montgomery, Alabama. And Montgomery, Alabama is close to Tuskegee, Alabama. And I knew, now, let me say this about being selected as a first African-American Blue Angel pilot. My goal was not to be a first of anything. It was to be a part of a very special organization. I was drawn to the Blues like all the other Africans that applied. But I was perfectly aware that if I was selected, I would be the first African-American pilot to fly with them. So I wanted to get a feel for, well, what is the cradle of blacks in aviation? Well, to me, it is Tuskegee Airmen.
Absolutely.
And so I went there and walked around the campus, saw some of the documents that highlighted them. Went to Martin Field, and I was flying an F-14 at the time. I had a student with me, and so we took off from Maxwell Air Force Base, and we did a flyby Martin Field and went to our next destination. But I knew that if I was selected, this is 1986, and there were lots of the Tuskegee Airmen that were still. I knew that when I went to air shows, these heroes would be at the air show, and I would have a chance to honor them for their sacrifice, because they laid the foundation for me to be a part of the organization.
Sure did, yeah.
And so when I look back at my own personal journey, I can reflect back to how important it is to certainly give back and to remember those who laid the foundation for what you're able to do.
Well, I'll tell you, when I was talking with Dan, and he was telling me all about the prejudice and all the thing he went through, and then at the end he says to me, you know, I learned on the road that there are good white men. And I looked at him and I said, thanks, Dan.
Well,
true story. He's a nice guy, nice man, but you know, it's your achievements are you know, really something else. And you not only flew with the Angels, but you also did a lot of missions. And tell us a little about where you went and what you did.
Well, let me give you sort of a rundown on my service. When I earned my wings, the first aircraft that I flew was the RFA Crusader. It was a single-piloted, high-speed reconnaissance airplane. It was a fighter version, but we had a reconnaissance version of the airplane. It was a very difficult airplane to land on the ship. And but the good news is, by the time I started flying, it had worked out a lot of the bugs in it, so it was a little bit easier, but still very challenging. And went on one deployment on that, and then I had to decide whether I was going to go back-to-back sea duty or go and be an instructor pilot, because the F-8 was being phased out. And I opted to go back-to-back sea because I wanted to have credibility in an airplane before I went to a training command. And that was a tough decision, but it was a good decision in terms of giving me the credibility to set me up to apply for something like the Blue Angels. So after my tour was over with, I went to the F-14 RAG as an instructor very briefly, and I applied for the Blue Angels and was selected, and flew in '86 in the A4. In '87, we transitioned to the F-18, so I flew that airplane for 2 years. The second year in the the second year, I was flying number 3 for a second year, and then the third year I went to the number 4 position. So out of the first year after those 3 positions, from there I went back to the Real Navy. Now we're operating, and I'm learning now how to be a department head. I'm running a maintenance department, which is the largest department in an F-14 squadron. You have probably about 200 people that report to you, 14 officers. I mean, you have your own little organization. And once that was complete, I went to Air War College. Air War College was during the time that the first Gulf War started. So I was in Air War College. After that was over with, I became an executive officer, second in command of an F-14 squadron. The first squadron was Fighter Squadron 1, the Wolf Pack. And this squadron is the squadron when we deployed, we actually went to southern Iraq, where we were actually enforcing the no-fly zone over southern Iraq. And I had a chance to lead 32 airplane strike package over the area. We all sort of split up and did our own missions, but it was a neat opportunity to see what it was like to lead 32 airplanes to.
Oh, I can imagine.
Now we didn't drop any bombs, but we were prepared to because we were enforcing the no-fly zone, and did that for a couple of years. Now, after this tour, it was a prerequisite for command of the Blues was you had to have operational command of a fighter squadron or attack squadron. Now it's only strike fighters. But that was my tour. And my squadron, Fighter Squadron 1, went away, and then I had to get Fighter Squadron 111. And that's when I finished my command tour. And what I was really happy about for Fighter Squadron 111, and they were called the Sundowners. And what that meant was, in World War II, the Sundowners, the Japanese had the
on the plane,
rising sun. Well, the Sundowners were shooting down the Japanese, so their call sign was Sundowners. And I had command of that squadron for about 12 months. And by the time we were finished with our department, the squadron won the Battle E and the Safety S, being the best F-14 squadron in the Pacific Fleet. And so I had a big part in the squadron achieving that, and that was an appropriate way to leave and be considered to be a candidate for the Blue Angel boss position. And went to Pensacola for an interview. I think there were 6 of us that went, and I was very blessed again a second time. And that's like lightning striking twice in the same location. It very seldom happens twice in a row, but I was blessed to be selected the second time to go back and fly the number 1 position. So out of those 6 positions, I had a chance to fly 3 of them. And when I have a chance to talk about the Blues let's say to a business group or Rotary or whatever,
to our audience.
Yeah. So what I normally would talk about is the leadership aspects of it, the team building aspect of it, and the individual accountability aspect of being a part of the team. All of it is so unique in terms of the intentionality of what you had to do to do your job of being a pilot, that it's relevant to so many other different aspects of our lives. And if you've been a part of something like the Blue Angels or Special Forces, the Thunderbirds, Golden Knights, any of those unique organizations, you're considered a national treasure. And the country has invested a lot of money in your development.
Oh, yeah.
For you to be a part of it.
Because those airplanes aren't cheap.
That's exactly. Not mention the training aspects of giving you the skill to be able to do it. And so I think that we are a resource that the country needs to tap into. And so my mission, now that I have a little flexibility, is to sort of make a difference. And I see myself, the next chapter for me is this. First of all, to keep healthy. The next thing is I do talks for police departments. I did 5 events for Lake County Sheriff's Department, different aspects of it. And I've done some stuff up in Atlanta. So that's one aspect of it. Another one is education. And that is talking to superintendents and principals and the administrators, and talking about the dynamics of a precise organization like the Blue Angels and how that relates to raising the standards in terms of how you go about your personal life, being that example, to drive home higher levels of performance. And I'm drawn to things that don't pay a lot of money, but they're very high value type venues. And so my challenge is to figure out how I can do more of those. And that's what I'm going to be
You do some mentoring in the colleges and stuff too, don't you?
Well,
I
occasionally.
saw something there about the colleges and your.
Yeah, occasionally I will have an opportunity. For instance, about 2 weeks ago, I went to my old ROTC unit, Florida A&M and Florida State. I used to be the commanding officer of the unit. And so I had a chance to talk to the midshipmen, about 50 of them. And then I had a chance to talk to some students at the FAMU, FSU Engineering School. And so I'm staying active as my schedule would permit, because I still have to go to that farm, to sort of stay grounded.
Got to take care of the farm.
There you go, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you get a chance to fly at all anymore? Anything?
I do not. Now, I had to make a choice due to finances between doing what I wanted to do on the farm or having me an airplane and do some flying and that sort of thing. And so I opted to invest a lot of my resources into. Now, I wish I could do both, and that is have a plane to fly to the farm. That would be, that would be taking care of both of those things. But I opted to do the farming thing, and it's a very good way of staying connected to where my roots of where I grew up. Making it more productive and having something that my kids and grandkids will have something to pursue if they so desire.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I think you're a great role model and example for the young people. I mean, I share a lot of what you do because I've been in the veterans community about 35 years, and I don't get paid doing this either. So we share that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I got a couple of questions that may seem silly.
But
why does anybody fly one plane like this and one plane like that?
Okay, you're actually saying one plane like this is inverted, and this is inverted. So what it is demonstrating the skill level, the high skill level that the pilots
You really got to trust one another.
You have to trust one another, and you have to have. I call it the 5 C's of trust. Good lead in. but in order to fly an airplane 36 inches wingtip to canopy, to fly inverted, to do all of these maneuvers, there's a lot of trust that's involved. But it's also a lot of teamwork that's involved and leadership, whether you're talking self-leadership or the team leader. And I call it the 5 C's of trust, the 5 C's of leadership, and the 5 C's of individual accountability. I think they're all interconnected. The thing to remember is, as you're learning how to fly any aircraft, especially in a formation, the key is you don't start off where you want to be. You start off as you gain confidence. You move it in until you get to those parameters. And of course, once you get there, invariably you're going to encounter some environmental condition that will make you want to loosen it up, because sometimes you fly in turbulence and wind shear and all sorts of
unforeseen things.
There you go. That will make the aircraft and flying that close a lot more intense. That's a good way to put it. So let me talk about those 5 things that I talked about, the 5 C's in an A. And what it stands for: character, competency, commitment, communication, and courage. And the A stands for accountability. So, for instance, if I was talking about individual accountability, the first thing I would say is we're asking each other a series of questions when we're learning how to do it. But if I'm talking about individual accountability, these are questions you're asking yourself. And the first question you ask is about your character, and that is, do I walk my talk? It's very easy to choose comfort over character. It's difficult to do the right thing sometimes when nobody's looking. Like, hey, nobody's looking. I can just,
right.
you know.
Yeah,
So
I can get away with it.
There
Nobody
you
will know
go.
the difference.
And you had to be able to do the right thing, especially when you was flying, but even more so when you were outside the cockpit, because people lead by example. They want to do what they see you do as a leader or as an individual. So that's the first thing. The second one was competency, and that question is related to, do I have the skill to do my job efficiently and successfully? That's what you're asking yourself when you're talking individual accountability. And you can't hide behind excuses. So the other aspect of it is, you ask yourself, do I have mastery of the skills to do my job, and do I have capacity to bring added value? Now, you could be, Bob, you could be a person that have a good attitude, and when you walk in a place, people look up to you, they gravitate to you because you got such a good attitude. Well, that's added value. You're smiling. I know it's true there, Bob, because I'm here.
Okay.
But anyway, and that's added value. But the mastery piece is so important. Mastery don't mean you just got it completely suitcase, but you're working toward that ever-changing high level of standard. Mm-hmm. And so that's what you're doing, and this is the key to it. As you get to that mastery level, you stop asking this question, can I do it? And then you start asking, how can I do it? Because once you get to the how can I, that's when creativity and innovation starts, is when you have mastery level. If you're still hanging on there, oh, can I do it? Well, you're not at the mastery level yet.
That's true.
But when you get up to that how can I, now that creativity, now that innovation start kicking in. Now you can think about, how can I do this differently? How can I do it more efficiently? How can I do it more profitably? And that's the level that you want to shoot for if you are intentional about your performance. So I can talk all day now, Bob.
I noticed that.
Yeah,
I noticed
okay.
that.
Okay.
But we don't have all day.
I know.
You know,
But that's just two of them.
how many years did you do?
I did 24 years in.
24 years?
Yep, sure did.
But you decided to retire, or did they just?
Yeah, it was at some point in your life you reach and say, you know what? I think this is time for me to transition to the next chapter in my life. Mm-hmm. And for me, I had command. I was second in command of the Navy Recruiting Command for a year, and that was actually a time for me to look at, okay, what's next for me? And what was next for me, I thought was going to be doing some consulting work, and I did that for a couple of months. And then I returned to my roots, flying airplanes. So I went and I was hired by UPS. I flew cargo at night for about almost 3 years, and then Coca-Cola was looking for someone to help lead their aviation department, their business aviation department. So I went there, spent 10 years at Coca-Cola. Wow. And this is a real important piece. The last 5 years I was there, I had a chance to do leadership and team development for a variety of teams within the Coca-Cola system. I mean, I had a chance to present over 60 or 70 presentation to all different groups of people. I mean, it was the high potential leadership development course that they had. Catalyst is what they called it, where they brought in 40 different leaders from around the Coke system for their future leadership development program. I presented to them about 4 years in a row, bottling plants and management team and marketing teams, the chief legal counsel, the CFO and her leadership team. So I had a chance to develop a very effective message that resonates with a variety of groups. And so that's what I try to do now.
Now I want you to give a message out there to the young people. What can the Navy, what should they do? Navy, Army, Air Force? What's a message you would like to give the young people today about their leadership and
about development? I would say that there are a variety of opportunities to develop yourself. For some of us, the military is an exceptional way. So for others, it may be going into the medical field. The good news is all of the fields that you can possibly want to go into require exceptional people. And if that's what you want, you have to be striving to be not perfect, but striving for excellence. And I can tell you this, when we were flying the airplane, the team has flown for over 70 years, and yet the team have not flown a perfect air show. When I was selected as a first African American pilot, I wanted to be perfect. I didn't want to make any mistakes. Well, it didn't take me long to figure out that was not the case. So I learned.
Just don't happen that way.
That's right. So I learned, despite my best efforts, I made mistakes. I learned that I was not perfect, and that's okay as long as you are able to sustain excellence. So for my young folks out there, I would say if you want to join the military, you have 5 great options. Obviously, you got the Navy, which would be my first choice. You got the Marine Corps, you got the Army, you got the Air Force and Coast Guard, and even the Space Force, but I'm not sure how they work with the Space Force. But those are all great branches of service that, if you're gravitating to something like aviation, you have great choice between the Navy and the Air Force. But the Marines have it and the Coast Guard, all branches have it, but those are the flagship branches that you gravitate because there are more opportunity for you to fly airplanes. And I think you learn some fundamental skills that are invaluable for you once you transition from the military. Whether you stay 24 years like I did or 4 years like you did, Barb, you learn some invaluable skills and friendship that are life-changing in nature.
Oh, it was good for me, It was good for me. And I tell everybody, the only reason I didn't stay in, because it was the middle of Vietnam, and I got tired of 6-7 days a week working. And I just said I had enough. Yeah.
Well, you're right about that. There is a tremendous amount of commitment and separation that's involved, but it's also very high rewards as well. So you have to have that balance. And a lot of people like you, Bob, say, hey, look, that's just too much time for me to transition. Others may stay 24 years like I did. So the good news
I want to thank you for your service. I think we got to be running out of time here.
Yeah, we do.
I'm not sure, but the book, once again.
I have one other comment.
Glad to be here.
And I'm long-winded, you can tell that. But that is, and this is what I love ending my conversation with because it's so relevant, and that is, I was asked by a lot of people, hey, how did you get from that farm to flying with the Blue Angels? And I used to say that you must pay the cost to achieve your goals. But life has taught me you don't pay the cost, you enjoy the journey. You pay the cost if you don't achieve your stretch objective. You pay the cost if you don't figure out how to balance between your work life and your personal life, but you enjoy the cost, what it takes for you to sustain a happy life. And the last thing I learned is as you transition life and you go from chapter to chapter of your life, you should always have something great to look forward to, and the best is yet to come. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Fist pump. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
We got to say goodbye, but this is how I do it, But I got to be honest with you. I got tennis elbow or something, so I'm having a hard time doing this, but I'm going to try it. And please join me. To all our veterans out there and our active military, we salute you for all you do. Until next time.